Welcome to Explore Classroom. My name is Andrea Villarreal Rodriguez, but you can call me Andy. I am a National Geographic Young Explorer, a storyteller, and your host for today. I am talking to you live from Monterrey, a city in northern Mexico. We are so excited to have you joining us for another event in the Explore Classroom storytelling series. If you tuned in onto our last episode, welcome back. And if this is your first time joining us, we are so happy that you're here. Today, we will continue on our journey to learn about the power of storytelling from National Geographic explorers and to inspire you to connect to the stories in your own communities. National Geographic's approach to storytelling is all about making an impact by telling the true stories around us in order to open hearts, change minds, and inspire action. Throughout the storytelling series, we'll discover how our explorers do just that. Before we get into today's lesson, I'd like to give a shout out to all of the classes that have completed any of the missions. Go ahead and cheer if you see your school name. Well done, classes. We absolutely love seeing examples of your work and learning about your progress from your teachers. If you do not see your school name, teachers, there is still time to submit the mission completion form for previous missions. And after today's event, complete mission 4 with your students and submit the form before our celebration event to have your school name added to the shout out list. Now let's get into the event. Today, our explorer is Tara Roberts. Tara is a storyteller who has spent the last few years with a group of Black scuba divers, historians, and archaeologists as they search for and help document the slave trade shipwrecks around the world. Tara's mission is to humanize and bring empathy to the story of the transatlantic slave trade, the forced transportation of millions of Africans to the Americans to be sold into slavery, reminding all of us that first and foremost, it's a story about people. People whose complex story of enslavement should be fully told. Tara's home base is in Atlanta, Georgia, and her work has taken her to many places and across thousands of miles, from Alabama to Florida in the US, to the beautiful waters of Costa Rica and St. Croix, all the way to Mozambique, Togo, Senegal, Benin, and South Africa, where she dives into the history and brings important memories back up to the surface. We are so excited to have Tara here with us live today to answer your questions. But first, Tara is going to take us into the field and underwater to tell us how she dives with a purpose.
When you dive, it's a completely different world. It's so below the surface. African history is like that. There's all this history that exists. We have not touched the surface. That makes me inspired. It makes me excited. My name is Tara Roberts. I'm following a group of Black scuba divers, historians, and archaeologists who are searching for slave shipwrecks around the world.
Attention everybody, attention on deck.
The mission of Diving with a Purpose is for people of African descent specifically to participate in restoration work around our oceans and to resurrect and recover our history.
Now we have an area of this artifact scatter, and we would use that area to place this along the baseline to give us an accurate bridge. We're not sure what it is, but we're trying to get the area surface of this whole area, so we're going to measure.
The search for slave shipwrecks, it requires divers for sure to go down and to be able to find the wrecks and use their eyes and their skills to search. But it also relies very much on historians and archaeologists. These wrecks are not intact. Most of them were wooden boats, so they're in pieces all over the ocean floor. It's not like you could just be diving and go, aha, I found a slave shipwreck.
Wow, the work that Tara and the members of Diving with a Purpose are doing is so important. I can't wait to learn more. But before we dive deeper into Tara's work, students, we'd like to hear from you. Teachers, please get close to your keyboard so you can answer for your class. Our question is, which of the following are you curious to learn more about after watching the clip of Tara in the field? Select all that interest you. The choices are A. The transatlantic slave trade. You want to learn more about African history. Answer B. Locating sunken slave ships. You want to know how they do it. Answer C. Tara's inspiration to tell this story. You're wondering what inspired Tara to work with the Diving for a Purpose team. And answer D. Scuba diving. You want to know what it's like to dive underwater. Again, the question is, which of the topics are you curious to learn more about? You can select more than one answer, and I'm going to pause and be quiet to give you time to think and select your answer. So let's start the countdown. I'm seeing some answers here, and it seems like all of them are very popular, but there is particular interest in answer B and C, locating sunken slave ships, and Tara's personal inspiration to tell this story. The answer is pretty similar over on YouTube, who also want to learn about scuba diving, particularly. So thank you for engaging and sharing your answers, students, and you're in luck, because today we're going to learn a bit more about all of those topics in today's show. And we're so excited to have Tara here live to share more about her work and answer questions from our audience. Welcome to Explore Classroom, Tara.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Andy. That was such a wonderful introduction.
Oh, thank you, Tara, and thank you for joining us. First, could you
Yeah.
tell us what inspired you to tell this story?
Oh, I'm happy to share. And I'm also happy to see everyone that I can see. So, hello. Great to see you all. Well, the first thing that I want to say is that I was actually not a scuba diver before I started this work. I just happened to be living in Washington, D.C., and I was there right when the National Museum of African American History and Culture opened. This is a big, big museum that cost millions and millions of dollars, and it sits right on the National Mall. And it's the first museum of its kind to tell the story of African Americans. So I had to go to this museum. And I went and I happened to see a picture on the second floor of the museum. All right, when you look at this picture, it's an ordinary kind of picture, right? Like maybe it's not, it's an ordinary picture. But for some reason, when I was in the museum that day and I saw this picture, it made me stop in my tracks. And that was primarily because I had never seen a picture of primarily Black women in wetsuits on a boat before. I'd never seen that. And so when I saw it, it made me remember dreams that I had as a child. When I was a kid, I was a sort of nerdy kid who loved to read books. And I loved to read fantasy books the most. I loved stories of adventure and magic and heroes that were going out on quests and they were having adventures in the world.
And I knew that I wanted to be a storyteller, but I also wanted to be an adventurer. And I wanted to be able to tell adventurous stories. But when I was growing up, I didn't see a lot of characters in the books that I loved that looked like me. So I didn't know that I could actually really be a person who had adventures in the world. So when I saw this picture of these Black women in wetsuits on a boat having adventures in the ocean, it made me think, well, maybe actually I could have some of my childhood dreams come true. And then I read about what they were doing, and I discovered that they were a part of this group called Diving with a Purpose, and that what they did was to search for and help document these slave shipwrecks around the world. I was thrown away. Like this just completely touched me, it moved me, and it made me want to be a part of it. So I ended up quitting my job so that I could travel around the world and help tell the stories of these divers, tell the stories of the ships that they were finding, and tell the stories of some of this history, which I don't know that we know a lot about. So all of this gave me a way to tell stories and to have adventures.
Tara, thank you for sharing what inspired you, and it's amazing that you left your job to follow this story. Now that your work takes you underwater, I'm curious, could you tell us what it's like to scuba dive?
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
I I never imagined that scuba diving would be the thing that would enter my life and change it so completely. I am from Atlanta, Georgia, as we saw on the map earlier. And if you look at the map, Atlanta is landlocked. Like it is not near the ocean at all. But scuba diving and the ocean became something that just I don't even know how to completely describe it, Andy. It just, like, the ocean is such a magical and beautiful place. I didn't know that it was like a whole other world. I don't know how many of you out there live near the ocean or have been to the ocean. I can see some hands. So some of you live near the, yes. Maybe some of you have swam in the ocean. Maybe yeah, some of you have. Maybe some of you have even snorkeled in the ocean. Have you put on a little mask? And yeah, some of you have done that. And maybe, I don't know, maybe there's even somebody who's done a little scuba diving. Anybody? Okay, I don't see any hands with that. That's okay. Well, for me, scuba diving just introduced me to this really beautiful world of the ocean. And I'd love to share with you a little bit of what that feels like for me. So, we're going to play an audio clip so that you can experience what I experience when I'm in the water. And it's just audio, so there's no visual to this. So, I invite you all to close your eyes so that you can really imagine what this feels like. Blue, as far as my eye can see. Salt spray tickling my face. The motion of the boat as it skims across the surface. It's beating us toward adventure. Next to me in the boat are women and men, all in wetsuits, all ages. Afros and braids are flying in the wind. They all look invincible. And they've got these big smiles on their faces. Out there, ahead of us, is a ship that's been buried under the waves for over 300 years. A ship like that once brought our ancestors to this side of the world.
Some incredible stories that these vessels have, but they're out of memory, out of mind. Why is that?
Mask on. I take one more look around, and then I tip over the side. I drop in. I love scuba diving. The way I feel like I'm in another universe, like I'm flying. I'm under the water, but here I can actually breathe. I look around through the beds of corals, the schools of fish, and I can see my companions gliding through the water. They're just as at home as I am. I feel so free.
I really want to go back to the ocean. I haven't been in the wild, and that clip just made me want to relive those memories. Tara, I've always been curious about scuba diving, and the sounds and the descriptions from the clip really brought back the underwater environment to life. So thank you for sharing that. And students, we know that a picture in the African American History Museum changed Tara's life forever. And we're curious if this has ever happened to you as well. So, teachers, please get close to your keyboard so you can answer for your class. Think about the picture that impacted Tara deeply and inspired her to seek out the Diving with the Purpose team to join their mission. Our question for you is, what is something that impacted you and made you wonder about the story behind it? The choices are a picture. Maybe you saw a photograph just like Tara did. B, a song. Maybe you heard a song that you were curious to learn more about. C, a place. Maybe you learned about or visited a new place that inspired you to learn more. D, a person. Perhaps it was a person you met or learned about that made you curious. Or answer E, a legend. Maybe there's an epic tale that made you curious. For example, in my case, I would choose C because every time I look at the huge mountains that surround my city, I can't help to wonder how they formed and how many millions of years ago did this landscape take shape. And was there anyone who called this place home before the city even existed? So that's my answer to the question. What is something that impacted you and made you wonder about the story behind it? If you have a response that is not one of these choices, we'd love to hear that too. So feel free to type yours into the chat. I'm going to pause and be quiet to give your class time to think and answer. Let's start the countdown. Time is up. And over here on Zoom, we have a lot of answers for legend. I'm so glad you guys are interested in that. We also have some answers from place. While on YouTube, we have lots of A's. So, a lot of pictures, just like Tara shared her story with us. So, thank you for sharing all the different ways that you have been impacted. And Tara, we were excited to learn more about how you find the stories resting on the ocean floor. So, what do you and the divers look for underwater when you're trying to find a slave shipwreck?
Great question, Andy. And I'm sure so many people are curious about that. The thing about slave shipwrecks that's a bit different from normal shipwrecks is that a lot of these ships, or the majority of these ships, were built in the 1600s and the 1700s. And that's when ships were built out of wood. So when these ships wreck, they splinter on the ocean floor. They are in pieces. And the ocean is a covetous, it likes to reclaim what's inside of it. So a lot of the pieces of the ships become encrusted in coral, or marine life will turn these pieces into homes. So it doesn't actually look like a ship on the ocean floor. And that means that you can't just go diving and then happen upon a slave ship. The work for finding a ship actually starts on land, and it starts in the archives. So our historians and archaeologists will comb through the records. And surprisingly, there are a lot of records about these ships. The stats say that there were 12,000 ships that brought Africans to the Americas. 12,000 ships. And they think about 1,000 of those ships wrecked. So there are records about the majority of those thousands of ships. And that's really because the slave trade was a business. and people wanted to make money off of the trade. So when these ships wrecked, they would file claims with the insurance companies that insured the wrecks. And the insurance companies would go out and they would investigate these claims. So there are all these records from ship's captains, from the crew. Sometimes these cases go to court, and so there are court records. So just imagine this. This is back in the 1600s and the 1700s, but there are court cases about these ships. So the process starts in the archives, and the historians go through the records and they read the records, and then they find out exactly where the wrecking event happened. Once they find out where it happened, if it's in this particular stretch of water, then they bring a boat and an archaeologist and divers. And then the divers take equipment, big equipment, like things called magnetometers or sonar side scanners or side sonar scanners. And they go up and down the area of the ocean where they think these wrecks are. They call the process mowing the lawn. You can imagine like what it's like when you get your lawn mowed, or maybe some of you actually have to mow your lawn. You go up and then you go down and you go back up and you go back down. That's the process that these boats will do with the equipment. And the equipment is looking for anomalies on the ocean floor. And these anomalies are found because it's pieces of metal on the ocean floor. So even though the boats were made out of wood, they were often connected with nails, or there might have been instruments, unfortunately, of violence that were used on the ships, and those were often made out of metal. So things like shackles, those sort of things are things that you can find on the ocean floor. So the boat goes up and down and it looks for these anomalies. And when it finds them, then divers go down to investigate. And they take cameras and then they go down with their eyes and for, they're looking to understand what these anomalies are. And then when they find something that they think is something that could be a part of the ship, they bring it up to the surface and they test it. And then when they test it and they find out that it matches the historical records and it seems like it really is the ship, then that's when my group gets involved. So my group, Diving with a Purpose, and me, we go down and we do this thing called underwater archaeology mapping. And that means we are on the ocean floor and we've got clipboards, we've got pencils, and we are actually drawing what we see on the ocean floor. So we're measuring it and we're drawing it. And then an architect gets involved after we have submitted our drawings, and that architect puts all of those drawings together so that we can actually see what the ship might have looked like, and we can understand the wrecking event. I know that was a lot of information, but that is the process of how you go about finding a shipwreck on the ocean floor. So I want to see if you might be able to guess what some of these things that we see on the floor actually are. It's hard when you're under the water. It's such a mysterious, beautiful place, but things don't look the way that they look on land. So when you're underwater, you might not recognize that the thing that you're seeing could indeed be a piece from a ship. So I want to show another picture, and I want to see if you can guess what these items are. These were two items that were found that were a part of a slave shipwreck. And I know they don't look like what you might think they are, but I want you to try to guess what you think they are. And you can sort of just, I don't know, shout out to your classes what you think they are, or maybe kind of write it down. Oh, I saw somebody has an answer. Ah, I see. Oh, you guys are so smart. You've guessed it. Yes, the picture that's on, like if you're facing the screen, the picture on the left is a cannon, and the picture on the right is a cannonball. So you guessed it perfectly. That means that there are some sharp eyes in this group and that you could be divers. You could be a part of our group and you could help us find these slave shipwrecks.
Tara, that was fascinating, and I never would have noticed all the underwater clues that help tell this story. And clearly, your passion is contagious and inspires me to think about the stories in my own life that have impacted me. So I'm curious, Tara, how have you connected with all this work personally?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think when I started this work, I wasn't even thinking about how it might impact me personally. I was thinking more, it's just important for this history to be in our collective human memory. It's just really important for that. But the more that I started to participate in this work, the more that I realized this is also my history and my story too. There was something that my mother's pastor said to me that I want to share with you because this was the thing that really got me to think about things differently. He mentioned something about the ancestors. I don't know if you all know who the ancestors are, but the ancestors are the people that we're descended from who've passed on. And in African traditions, the ancestors are a huge part of understanding the world. In many African traditions, people believe that the ancestors are still connected to the living world and that we can contact them for protection, for guidance, and for good fortune. And I'd never really thought about the ancestors before, quite frankly. It wasn't until my mother's pastor and my mother asked him to bless me because I'm her only child and I've been traveling around the world following these divers and my mother was nervous for me and she was like, "Oh, we have to get you blessed for this work." So she asked her pastor to bless me. And I want to play for you what he said to me when he blessed me.
If you can get in tune with the essence, the spirit of those of our ancestors who were lost during that middle passage, invite them, invite their blessing on the work. You can do so by your prayer meditation. You come across names, speak their names, speak the names, speak the names. And then ask them to bless you. Ask them for permission to tell the story. Ask them to go before you to make the way straight, smooth, and harmonious.
Listen, I hold their stories in my arms. Stories from the depths of my ocean. I've memorized every inch of their heartbeats. There is a song growing in my waves we have not heard before. Listen. It speaks their names.
So by his
That was
asking,
incredible, I just gotta say. You can continue, but I was really struck about that, and I'm sure you were too, so tell us how it felt.
yeah, that was Bishop Jack Bomar from Hillside International Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was also Aaliyah Pierce, who is a Nat Geo explorer and a spoken word artist. And when Bishop Jack told me to speak their names, he helped me humanize those people who were on the ships. I have to admit that when I used to think about them before this, I would think about them more as statistics or sort of as faceless victims. I wasn't thinking about them as individuals. But by Bishop Jack asking me to speak their names, it really made them come alive for me. This is a stat for you to just know, there were approximately 12.5 million Africans who were brought from Africa to the Americas to be enslaved. And they estimate that somewhere around 1.8 million Africans died just in the crossing from Africa to the Americas. So 1.8 million is a huge number. It's a lot of people who lost their lives in this moment. And it means a lot to actually honor them by trying to speak their names. We won't know the names of all of them, but we can begin to humanize and honor their journey. And so that felt really, really important to me. And the other thing is that by speaking their names and beginning to think of them as individuals, it gave me the courage to actually look back and to try to find my own ancestors, to find my own connection to these slave shipwrecks. I hadn't looked for my own ancestry before this. I'd been a little too afraid to look back because I thought that this history was too painful, and I was just scared to look back at it. But what I realized is that these are stories that are about more than just tragedy and trauma and pain. These are also incredible stories of resilience and resistance and survival. So there are an amazing amount of stories that are a part of this. And through this work, I ended up connecting, Andy, with my great great grandpa Jack, who I didn't know much about. But because of this process, I ended up looking up more and more information about him. And he has incredible stories. He was born in 1837, enslaved in North Carolina. And now I know all kinds of stories about my great great grandpa Jack, and he is an inspiration to me. So this absolutely impacted me personally.
Tara, that was beautiful. And I really love that final message. It is so important to not only tell one story, but those of others as well. And I'm an only child as well, so I totally resonate with your mom and can really understand why her words and the pastor's words had a profound impact on you. And students, we've just learned why Tara is telling these stories. And if you were following along throughout the storytelling series, you know that you're preparing to tell a story about someone in your own community. Think about the person that you interviewed or want to interview for your final mission. Why do you think it's important to share their story with others? For example, I chose my best friend Susie, and she's a young activist who is building a vibrant community to protect and restore the Santa Catarina River in our hometown. So that's why it's important for me personally to tell her story. So, students, go ahead and share your answers with your teachers, and teachers, please go ahead and type those into our chat. Once again, the question is, why do you think it's important to share the story of the person you interviewed? And I'm going to pause and give you a little more time to think about your answers. So let's start the countdown. We have some beautiful answers coming in. We have to spread the word from Kaylin, to inspire and encourage people from Abigail. What's not to know cannot be learned from. That's a really wonderful lesson from Escuela Tribu Viva Dos. To be inspired, to learn more, to understand how the people around you exist with purpose, to step in their shoes and connect emotionally. We're getting so many wonderful, wonderful answers. And over on YouTube, um, people want to tell stories to have them travel around the world, to have them learn and inspire even more people. And all of these are absolutely wonderful. So, Tara, do you want to add anything? We're seeing so many wonderful answers here in the chat.
Oh, those are amazing answers. This is such a smart group. I'm so impressed by all of you. And I love that you are figuring out ways to tell stories. I think the only thing that I would add in this moment is to also think about telling stories about your ancestors too. I don't know if some of them are included in the people that you've interviewed, but knowing more about your own roots helps you know where you come from and who you come from. And I bet that there's some amazing stories that you can learn from talking to your cousin or your mother or father or your aunt or your uncle or your grandma or your grandpa. So I hope that you're including your the people in your family so that you're learning more and more stories about where you come from. So that feels really, really important and great to me.
Definitely, Tara. And I know students, you're all eager to ask Tara even more questions, so it's time. If you're watching on YouTube, please send us your questions using the chat bar. We record all of them as they're sent in, so please only send each question once. And teachers, please let us know who's asking the question so we can give your class or your student a shout out. And if you're watching over here on Zoom, use a hand raise function at the bottom of your screen to let me know that your class has a question. And we'll call on as many classes as time allows. But if we call on you, remember to use a nice, loud voice to ask your question. And if you have any issues with your mic, just go ahead and type your question into the chat. And so, actually, a lot of friends from both Zoom and YouTube are wondering, how do scuba divers write underwater, or what kind of pen, paper technology do you use to map out the artifacts on the ocean floor?
Oh, that's a great question. I feel like I've got scientists in the room. Cool. Um, so we use Mylar paper, which
It definitely did, I think, and it was fantastic. And it's a great lead into our next question because Elora from the Touchstone Community School is wondering, do you have any other stories about finding the Clotilda, a wooden slave ship?
ooh, the Clotilda is a great story. Um, that's a story. There are a number of films that are out about it. Nat Geo has produced three of them, and the most recent one, in case anybody wants to learn even more than what I'm going to say about it, it's called The Clotilda. It's called Clotilda: The Return Home, and it's on Disney Plus and Hulu. And I'm actually the host of it, so watch it. But the Clotilda is a fantastic story because it was the latest slave ship to have been found. It was found in 2019 in Mobile, Alabama. And what makes the Clotilda a special story, there are two things that make it a special story. The first thing is that it disproves everything that I said earlier about how slave ships are found. So, if you remember, I said that most slave ships are, when they wreck in pieces because they're made out of wood. So, the Clotilda was a ship that was made out of wood, but because it was sunk in the Mobile River instead of the ocean, the mud in the Mobile River preserved the ship. So it is the only ship that has been found intact. So it's an incredible archaeological find. And this happened in 2019. So they're still in the process of documenting it and deciding whether they're going to bring it up or they're going to leave it down or just what's going to happen with it. So that's an incredible story. But the other part that makes the Clotilda an incredible story is because of who was on the ship and what they did. So this was a ship that was known as the last known American slave ship to have come over from Africa. Like it started in Mobile, Alabama. There was a plantation owner who made a bet that he could build a ship, sail it to Africa, buy Africans, and sail them back to the US without anyone knowing about it. And when he made this bet, it was in the year 1860. But the slave trade had been made illegal by this time. It had been illegal since 1808. So you actually weren't supposed to, well, you were never supposed to do it. Like it's not a good thing to have been done, but it was against the law to bring Africans across the ocean, even though Slavery itself was not illegal. The transportation of Africans was illegal. But this boat owner decided to do it anyway. And he succeeded. He managed to go to Africa. He went to the country of Benin. He bought 110 Africans, brought them back to the US. What is astonishing about this story, though, so he did this in 1860. By 1865, the Civil War happened and enslaved people were freed. So these people came over in 1860. By 1865, they were freed. What is astonishing is that they decided they really wanted to go home, but they couldn't afford to go home. So they decided that they were going to work as hard as they could and they were going to save up their money and they were going to buy land. So that's what they did. 32 of them worked for 9 more years and they managed to save up $300. With that $300, they bought 57 acres of land and they named that land Africatown. And Africatown grew into a full-fledged community. By 1960, there were close to 20,000 people living on that land. And the amazing thing is that Africatown still exists today. So here you have a group of Africans who were formerly enslaved, and they managed to buy land and create a community that still lives today. That is an incredible story of accomplishment.
We actually have a follow-up question to that from Caesar on YouTube, who is wondering, how did you feel when you scuba dived for the very first time? Were you scared? Were you excited? A little bit of both?
So even though I didn't know much about scuba diving until I started this, I have to say I loved the water. I didn't grow up in the ocean, but I grew up in pools and I love to swim. So when I started, I loved it. I just, I took to the water. I took to scuba diving. I thought it was amazing that I could stay underwater. And with the scuba equipment, you can stay underwater for anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour so that I could go down and not have to come back up, was just amazing to me. And there's something that is so quiet and meditative to me in the water. It just felt like one of the most peaceful, beautiful things that I've ever done. And there's so much marine life that's weird looking, like it's odd looking fish. Um, it's incredible coral. Like it just felt like a whole other world to me. So I was entranced by it. It's beautiful.
Thank you, Tara. Unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our show, which I know is really sad, but we have time for one more question. So, Tara, what final message do you have for all of our student explorers watching today?
I think the message that I have is to stay curious and don't be afraid to follow where your curiosity leads you. Again, I never would have imagined that scuba diving would be the thing to enter my life and change it. That would it would lead to me being an explorer with National Geographic or me telling all of these stories or even being able to talk to you. But because I followed my curiosity, even though nobody else around me was doing that, so don't be afraid to do something different. Um, it led me here, and I'm forever grateful for that. So I wish that for you as well, that you follow your curiosity and you allow it to take you where it wants you to go.
And we are forever grateful that you joined today's show, that you shared so many wonderful stories, and that beautiful final message. So, thank you, Tara.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for having me, for tuning in. It was good to see you all.
Mhm. Thank you to all the students for engaging with us and for bringing your very thoughtful questions. And thank you, teachers, for bringing your classes to our show. We have one final mission for you all students participating as part of our storytelling series. This week, your mission is to tell a community story. and you will use the key details and quotations from your interview to tell this story. We cannot wait to read them. And teachers, please use the educator guide to learn more about this mission and submit the mission completion form to keep us updated on your students' progress. And for those following the storytelling series, the celebration event will be on Thursday, March 13th, which is 2 weeks from now. And you'll hear more about me, about my own journey as a storyteller, and we'll reflect on everything that we've learned together throughout the series and hear directly from some of you about the stories that you've uncovered in your own communities. Be sure to check out our website, natgeoed.org/explore classroom over the next few weeks to view our spring schedule and register for even more exciting events. And when you register, you can request a chance to be featured up here on the screen with us. And lastly, we would love to hear from you. So teachers, please take a moment to fill out this quick survey and let us know how you enjoyed today's show. The link is now in the chat. And you can share about your experience on social media using the hashtag #ExploreClassroom. From all of us at National Geographic, have a wonderful day. Like Tara said, stay curious and keep exploring. We'll see you next time on Explore Classroom. Bye!